Welcome to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. I'm Dr. Amy Cooper-Smith, a doctorate prepared nurse practitioner, and this show is about empowering you to live a radiant, healthy, and balanced life. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest, Dr. Christiaan Oranje. Now, you are the Soul Matters mentor and the founder of Walking the Red Carpet, which is a
Mhm,
company that provides high level transformational programs, services, and events.
mhm,
You're the author of The Elvis Syndrome,
mhm,
and you were the 2025 Spiritual Wellness Leader of the Year.
mhm.
So,
Yes.
congratulations and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Amy. A real pleasure to be with you and to serve your audience. Yeah, it's always great to be able to share my gifts.
Well, we're excited too.
Mm.
So, you mentioned in your bio that you started your earlier career, you were successful and busy, but you just weren't happy. So,
Mm.
how did that experience lead you to become a transformational speaker?
Well, we speak about a long, long journey here, Dr. Amy. And basically, let's go back to the start. I experienced I counted it, 12 sudden, unexpected, negative, impactful, call it traumatic events before
Mm,
birth, during birth, and after birth. Now, I don't know if you ever heard the Jesuit expression, give me a boy or girl age 7 and I show you the man slash woman, but it refers to the principle, the phenomenon that within the 7 years of our lives, we absorb whatever we encounter and we store it in our subconscious, and that's where our conditioning, the habits, the way we think and believe are coming from. Well, and you can imagine that coming into the world with those kind of impactful experiences, that it had a great influence on my life. um, the way I live my life can you best see as how a whale travels. Sometimes I came above surface, had my successes, but then needed to dive under again to cope with what you mentioned, the emptiness, the feeling unfulfilled and utterly unhappy. And it was particularly in the moment where I lived and worked in New York. For the outside, I lived a glamorous life. It seemed to be the dream life that I was living. I had theater shows produced and performed them in an off-Broadway theater, the last one. I had financially, I could do anything I wanted. But backstage, behind the scenes, I had to go to 4 therapy sessions each week to cope with the state of being I was in. And that brought me to the question, how come that the most famous and most talented and smart and wealthy people sometimes can end up feeling utterly miserable?
mm,
And this quest that I went on at that moment to find answers, particularly also for my own state, the question, find answers, what actually is going on and what is causing it and how it can be resolved and transformed. You can see that use another metaphor is putting a puzzle together. So becoming a transformational speaker is actually due to and the result of a long journey of seeing myself, taking myself as a laboratory and figuring all these things out. And piece by piece by piece, over a long period of time, the puzzle became more complete. And that also means, and you can see that as gathering information, gathering experiences, gathering insights, and a wealth of tips and tools. And then at a certain moment, I can remember it as the day of yesterday. I heard this voice inside of me saying, Christian, this what you now have experienced and what all the things that you've now received, don't think that it is only given to your benefit and well-being alone. This what you have experienced, this what you've been given, is meant to be shared.
yeah, I love that. So, you were on a journey of self discovery, and then what you learned
Absolutely.
was so valuable that your calling now
Absolutely.
is to help others.
Absolutely. Yes. Correct. Mm.
Well, I love that. So, you mentioned something called the triple dynamic. So, what is that?
Yes. Well, to give you a bit of a context, at the moment I work primarily with affluent soul-seeking women over 40 who have it all, but still feel empty and unfulfilled. And the reason I mentioned this because in the work that I do with them, I like to use that as an example to illustrate certain principles, like, for instance, the triple dynamic, because that principle, where it is based upon, is, at least to me, the most obvious in working with those kind of women. The reason being is that slowly I got more insights how actually what is actually happening behind the scenes of, let's say, the high society circles. And there is an unspoken rule that it is considered to be not done to speak openly and sometimes not even privately about one's deeper, darker feelings and thoughts. Now, just to make clear, I'm not here to criticize that rule because I understand why it came into being and what its function is. What I do want to point out is what I see as the consequences of this kind of yes, regulation or attitude or whatever you can call it. It is that cultivating a habit of numbing
Mm.
and the attitude to develop that attitude habit of numbing results in training oneself an attitude of pretense, pretending that everything is all right. You have your smile, even though you're falling apart on the inside. That's the first element of the triple dynamic, because in working with them, because I see that so clearly in them, the effect of suppression, I realized at some point, and I could see actually the direct relationship between suppressing negative thoughts and feelings and how that plays out and expresses itself in outer circumstances, meeting the not so kind people, and you name it.
Yeah, I think that
So
plays out.
that's one element. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that plays out also in other socioeconomic circles too, where, how are you? I'm
absolutely.
fine. I'm absolutely fine. And here's my Facebook post of me being fine and enjoying life when later you find out that people are really going through struggles and they're fine.
Yes. Yes, you're
Yeah.
absolutely correct. Because when the listeners, viewers, when you look at your own upbringing and look at the people that surrounded you, your parents, the family members, the teachers, and so on and so forth, then I can really also acknowledge what you're saying, that that is also a kind of environment where, think about, were your feelings and certain thoughts allowed? Were you able and allowed to freely express yourself? And so, yes, that is indeed also an environment where the numbing is cultivated. Also, it comes from certain experience, like I have had in my own life, the sudden, unexpected, negative impact of for events. Those events are so overwhelming. There's so much coming at you, and so suddenly you just have to push what you cannot process in that moment into your sub, and sometimes even straight into your unconscious, just to be able to deal with whatever you need to deal with. So that's another kind of circumstances that leads to the development of habits of numbing. Yeah.
Do you think people, when they have those major traumatic events and they cannot process them in that moment and they suppress them, do they have a way of surfacing later?
Here comes the second element of the triple dynamic into play. And that comes, I made this, you could say, discovery because I noticed very recently a shift has taken place. The kind of clients that now approach me and ask me for my assistance, the kind of issues, problems, difficulties, challenges they bring to the table are way more complex and way more severe than what I've experienced before. And it made me wonder why. Here's the thing, that last year in March, certain events happened which has to do with planetary constellations, and I believe that the planetary constellations have an influence here on us on Earth. ask a homeopath, and they know that certain flowers they use for remedies are best to be harvested at full moon. So there's a kind the ocean and the tides, the tides are influenced by the moon. So why not have other planetaries or planets influence also? I do believe that is so. So what happened is that at that moment, certain portals, so to speak, cosmic portals opened, which gave us, humanity, the opportunities to uh, to access, let's call it by name, to transition into the fifth dimension way of living. Now, what is important to understand about it is that this is not a place I am talking about. It is not somewhere you go to. It refers to an inner state of being. The transition happens internally. That's one thing. The other thing is that, in my understanding, it is not possible. And if it is, don't consider it to be wise to transition straight from this 3D reality we've been living in for centuries straight into 5D. And the reason for that is this. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are developing conditioning within ourselves. And that conditioning that is creating certain circumstances, surrounding us with certain people we sometimes do not like or nor want. That's the effect and the result of the conditioning at work. The disruption and the chaos it is already creating here in 3D, if we would leave that untouched and we would go straight into 5D, then this conditioning carrying that with us will again greatly disturb the quality of life and our state of being there. So that doesn't make sense. It's like climbing a mountain. The higher you go, it's just necessary from time to time to let things go. You cannot take with you all the things you've gathered at base camp. It simply doesn't work.
So let me stop you for a second. What happened last March?
There were, if you look at it and you search for certain clips, there were certain dates shortly after one another that specific cosmic portals
Okay.
opened, and that gave us the opportunity to make it available to us to make such a transition, which before those dates, before those portal opens, were not accessible for us until that moment.
So this was a good thing.
It is,
Okay, good.
absolutely. Yes, because we can now go to the third um, element of the triple dynamic. If you don't mind, is that okay?
Sure. Oh, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
The thing is this, when we speak about conditioning, we also have to take into account that all humans, have been created with a conscious, with a subconscious and an unconscious. The characteristic of the sub and unconscious is that we've stored things in there of which we are not yet or not anymore conscious of, which means that certain things like the traumatic events, which we were not able to process at that time, stored in the sub and unconscious. The unfortunate thing is, or let me say this first, the subconscious storing information in our subconscious is a wonderful feature. Everyone here listening, watching, think about if you have a driver license. You have learned it, and it was in a bit more in first all this information like look there and do this and do that, but then at a certain point it becomes automatic. And that's the function of the automatic, of the subconscious at play. You
Right.
install certain habits, and at a certain point, the habits turn into autopilot, and then it results in stepping into your car, start the engine, drive off, and enjoy the ride without having to learn it anew every time again. The unfortunate thing is that it also works that way with the negative habits we develop. So if that's the situation, that our conditioning is stored in those areas we are not yet conscious of, the question then is, how can we become conscious of that we are not yet aware of? The universe has created a wonderful feature. There's an expression in Sufism that says, In this material world, everything is done through mirrors. Oh, the function of a mirror is that it points to something within ourselves that we need to face, need to work with, need to release, resolve, heal, transform. Another word for mirror is catalyst. Same. Catalyst can appear in different ways and forms. It can come through being confronted with a certain situation or circumstance. Poof. It can be the meeting with a particular kind of person or group of people. Boom. It can come through a physical condition like illness or disease. Bang. It can come through a sudden inner emotional mental imbalance, like for instance burnout. And those kind of things, when it is taken as that's the invitation to something that refers to something within, then we make use of those catalysts in the correct way. And when it is then leads us to the point where we need to be, we work ourselves through it and we do it in the correct way, then automatically the people, the circumstances we don't know, like or don't want, the physical conditions and the inner imbalances simply at some point disappear and vanish, or at least diminish at its impact because it has fulfilled its function.
Excellent. Now I'm going to have you hold that thought. We're going to pause for a break from our sponsor. You're listening to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. I'm Dr. Amy Coopersmith, and my guest today is Dr. Christiaan Oranje.
Mhm.
Before the break, we were talking about how high performing women over 40 sometimes get stuck, and sometimes, despite external success, they're just not happy. So,
Mhm.
you talked about the triple dynamic and explored why this happened. And
Mhm.
before the break, we were talking about catalysts, traumatic
Mhm.
events, and how that can
Mhm.
lead to burnout. Can you
Mhm.
tell us a little more about that?
So yes, before the break, we also talked about the triple dynamic, and one of the elements of it is the first actually is that I see a direct relationship between what people repress, the negative feelings and thoughts, and how that expresses itself in the outer circumstances or in the on the in the physical conditions, like what you mentioned, the burnout. The thing is that repressing unwanted feeling and thoughts take a lot of energy. And burnout, as I see it, is a way of the depletion of vital energy, so to speak. And particularly high performing women, the word itself already says it all. They have to perform on a high level. So they are under this pressure. They are expected to deliver high performances. And when the energies that are available are used for that purpose, as well as a lot of energy is used to repress all the feelings and thoughts that they consider to be unwanted, or they were told were unwanted, and so on and so forth, or they feel the fear of feeling it, and so on and so forth, then the reservoir they have within themselves is slowly used and burned out. But the underneath is something else going on here, and that has to do with something that I'm a bit kind of searching how to say it in a compact and in a nutshell manner. I believe that every human being has what is called an essence, uh, true nature. Sometimes the word is used the higher self. What usually happens, particularly in a traumatic event, but also in other occasions, is that something happens that negatively interferes with that connection. Now, the interesting thing you could say is that this connection, I believe, never can be lost, but we can have the perception, we can experience it as the loss of that connection because something is interfering or has come in between, which gives us the illusionary sense of separation
What are we separated from?
from our source.
Okay.
Because when you let for instance let me also try to do that in a nutshell here. I like to see the entire creation as the ocean of life. I consider us human beings to be a water drop in that ocean. That's not so far from the truth because it's scientifically proven that we are built out and created 85%. The percentage varies. Sometimes I see 75, sometimes 85% water. The thing is, when it's that we as a water drop, therefore, are made of the same substance as the entire ocean. When you use other terminologies like the spirit, then I see and consider ourselves as humans being the individual, the unique individualization of spirit called soul. Now, soul slash higher self, that's a bit more of another discussion to really pull that apart and to explain how that actually is. So for now, let's call it our higher self. The higher self is therefore, in that metaphor, directly related to the source of everything. Or you could also say the source of everything is working through our higher self to nurture us, to support us, to guide us, to inspire us, and all these kind of things. So when something interferes, then we are directly um, cut off from this source of inspiration, source of energy, and that is, to me, leads to a disconnect of the sense of aliveness in ourselves. And this disconnect of aliveness and this disconnect of being replenished by the cosmic energies that feeds us and nurture us, that is eventually leading to a condition like burnout. And as I mentioned before the break, a catalyst's function is to point us at certain elements within ourselves that we are not yet or not anymore conscious of. And in that sense, I always invite my clients to see this as the catalyst and to invite them to explore together with me what this situation, this particular catalyst in the form of a burnout, what does it want to show us? What does it want to tell us? What is it here that wishes to be learned? What is it that wishes to be acknowledged, to be seen, and to be healed and transformed?
So you mentioned consciousness. When we are suppressing, feelings from negative events, is that something we're doing consciously, or is that something that just something else is taking over?
In a situation of a traumatic event, it is necessary that we store and push something in the sub and unconscious because we need to deal with the situation and we need to have all resources available. And the things that we don't actually need, we just have to store there. So that is an automatic mechanism that is building in our human DNA, so to speak. There are the high society rules that can contribute to numbing it, and or if that is conscious, I don't think so, because when we would be conscious of it, we probably would say, I'm not going to do it, or maybe we were conscious and we were too afraid to speak up, and we started to do it anywhere to conform to, just to be part of the tribe, and the fear of being annihilated and outcasted, all these kind of things play. The the There are moments, and it's a fine line if there's a consciousness as play, or if it is not consciousness in play, because it very much depends on how you define consciousness. One of my spiritual teachers defined consciousness of being conscious of what you consciously are conscious of.
Ah,
Okay,
that's
so
very
uh,
clear.
very clear, yes. And so sometimes, though, we ourselves can make the decision of this is something I never ever want to feel again
Yes.
or think again.
So then how do we do that?
The simplest answer is actually comes from the power of thought. I recently had actually at the talk at the gala event where I received my award. I was also granted to have a keynote speech at that gala event. And then I talked about the power of thought. And one of the first lines I mentioned, everything that we see here in tonight, the table, the objects on the table, the chair you're sitting on, once did not exist. And meaning, pointing at some point in time, someone got the idea, the thought, to create something like the chair, called it a chair, did everything to make it, and so on and so forth. And basically, what I pointed out is that that we see, everything that we see happening within ourselves and outside starts with thought. War starts with thought. Peace starts with thought. So when we declare and use the power of thought, this is what I'm never ever going to do again, then it will have its effect or in how it is executed.
Stating your intent is the first step.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So we're almost out of time for today. But if we were to leave our listeners with maybe one thing, one act that they could do to start on this journey, what would that be?
There are two things that's what standard that I offer someone new who is asking me to work with. First, make sure that when you do transformational work on a deeper level, particularly when you start to work on your unconscious, and I highly recommend that you do it with someone who is an expert in doing that work. I wouldn't recommend to do that alone. First, create the proper circumstances and conditions to do this particular work in a safe and secure way. To say, to mention the kind of a metaphor of dancing, doing a little dance or a high rope in the big circus top, make sure you hook up your safety net first. Secondly, and that's the extremely important and very valuable next step. Create Re-establish a more direct and conscious connection with your essence, your true self, your higher self, because that is kind of your guiding mechanism, but that's also the input I mentioned earlier that is then becomes available again. And then, therefore, the sense of aliveness and the revitalization is a result of it. Maybe it's also good that I would like the listeners to leave you with the following. When something unpleasant happens in life, which does, that's life, the most logical result and effect of it is that it lowers your state. It lowers your vibrational state, and you come into slide into what is also known as a non-resourceful state. Being in fight, flight, freeze, or
Right.
being totally in fear, or this in chaos, or whatever, is such a state that is not resourceful. What actually is the thing that in those kind of situations that you're challenged by something, this is the last thing that you would like to see happening. What you actually need is to be in a high vibrational, resourceful state in order to, you need to be energized and vital and clear mind and determined and all the kind of things that you need to deal with it in a proper way. What you actually need is something that will help you to transform those negative thoughts and feelings into something that is going to support you and as quick as possible. Now, I do have something that I would like to offer to your audience. Is it the right moment to do that?
Yes, you have a gift.
Yeah, because if that's something that I now described
Yeah.
feels that would be useful, then I would like to offer this to you as a small gift. It is a downloadable ebook. It's called the 5 steps to transform any negative feeling or thought anywhere, anytime, in 7 minutes or less. And the reason why I came up with it is because in my life, I never had someone when I was young who told me and explained that negative feelings and thoughts can actually be transformed and be turned into something like positive thoughts and feelings that uplift and energize and makes me joyful. Now, the value I see in this 5 step ritual is that actually helps you to prevent suppressing negative feelings and thoughts and instead help you to transform them into those positive thoughts and feelings that support you, contribute to your highest well-being. So the download link will be then in the show notes.
Yep.
I will send it to you, Dr. Amy, and then it comes to you by email. Now, in addition, if you listening here, viewing this interview, and you are an affluent woman in having it all, yet feeling empty, unfulfilled, and unhappy, for you, I would like to offer you a complimentary from pointless to purpose treasure map consultation. This consultation is a 1 hour consultation, and you have an opportunity to meet me and to experience how I work. You can ask me questions directly, and you can also, in that consultation, find out if I'm the right person to assist you in the changes you want or need to make. Now, just to be clear, this is a no pressure consultation. There are no obligations. This is simply an invitation to you to explore.
Well, wonderful. And I'm definitely going to check out that ebook myself. And I'll certainly post that for our listeners. So thank you
Right.
again for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Yes, Dr. Amy, I thank you and wish all the listeners that this interview may have, and I trust that it will support you in your highest wellness, wholeness, and well-being.
Wonderful. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. If there are topics you would like to hear about, please send an email to radiantpodcast2025@gmail.com. I'll be back next Saturday morning at 7:30 with more expert insights and practical strategies to help you live a radiant and healthy life. Until then, here's to your best life.